The marble and gold lobby of the Regal Sterling Hotel reflected 1,000 points of light from chandeliers that could have blinded the angels themselves. Ethan Cole moved through that shimmer like a man who owned the world, shoulders back, platinum card ready, and a woman on his arm who wasn't his wife. At 39, Ethan still had the kind of confidence that turned heads and opened doors. Dark hair swept back, designer suit tailored to perfection, and a smile that had gotten him out of more lies than he cared to count. The woman beside him, Isla Monroe, 28, striking in a cream dress that hugged every curve, looked at him like he'd hung the moon. "Reservation for Mr. and Mrs. Cole," Ethan said smoothly, sliding the platinum card across the polished reception desk. The lie tasted like champagne, expensive, effortless. The front desk manager, composed in her sleek black suit, typed without expression. "Of course, Mr. Cole. Welcome to the Regal Sterling." Isla leaned closer, her perfume subtle but intoxicating. "This place is unreal," she whispered. "Are you absolutely sure we won't be seen?" Ethan's hand settled on her waist, possessive and confident. "Completely private. The owner keeps to herself, some reclusive businesswoman who never shows her face. Nobody will bother us here. Trust me." He'd said those same words before, to Rachel from accounting, to Simone from the Investors Gala, to Melissa from that conference in Boston. Each time the words had worked, each time he'd walked away unscathed. After 12 years of marriage to Victoria, Ethan had perfected the architecture of deception, business trips that didn't exist. Conference calls from hotel rooms, weekends justified by client emergencies that Victoria never questioned. She trusted him, blindly, completely, dangerously. That trust had made his double life almost absurdly easy. The manager's fingers paused over the keyboard for just a heartbeat. Something flickered in her eyes. Amusement? Recognition? It passed too quickly for Ethan to notice. "Your penthouse suite is ready," she said, handing him the key card. "However, I should mention that our new owner has been very hands-on this week. She likes to personally greet our premium guests during her first few days." "New owner?" Ethan asked, only mildly interested. He was already imagining silk sheets and champagne on ice. "Yes, sir. The hotel changed ownership just 3 days ago. Quite exciting for all of us, actually. She's very passionate about hospitality." The manager's smile was professional, but something in her tone felt deliberate. "She should be down any moment." Ethan pocketed the keycard, already pulling Isla toward the elevators. "Great. We'll be upstairs if anyone needs us." He'd taken 2 steps when the voice stopped him cold. "Ethan." One word. Just his name. But it was spoken in a voice he knew as intimately as his own pulse. The voice that had whispered, "I love you" on their wedding night. The voice that had trusted him with every tomorrow. The voice he'd been systematically lying to for years. His body went rigid. The lobby air seemed to thicken. Slowly, so slowly the chandeliers seemed to dim. He turned, and the color drained from his face. Standing at the grand entrance of the lobby, framed by floor-to-ceiling windows and late-afternoon light, was Victoria Cole, his wife. But not the Victoria he'd left at home that morning in yoga pants and a ponytail, asking what time his flight landed. This Victoria wore a white power suit that matched the marble beneath her heels. Her dark hair was swept up in an elegant twist, diamond earrings caught the light, and her expression, calm, controlled, absolutely unreadable, belonged to someone who held all the cards and knew it. She walked toward him with the measured grace of a woman who owned the ground itself. Because she did. "Victoria?" Ethan's voice cracked despite every ounce of willpower. What are you doing here?" She stopped 3 feet away, close enough that he could see the absolute absence of surprise in her eyes. "I was going to ask you the same thing, darling. Though I suppose I already know the answer." Isla's grip on his arm loosened. Her voice came out small, confused. "Wait, your wife?" Victoria's gaze shifted, not cruel, just assessing, clinical. "And you must be Isla Monroe, the interior designer from Ethan's office. I've seen your portfolio, very impressive work, though I didn't expect to see it showcased here." The blood drained from Isla's face. You know who I am?" "Oh, I know everything," Victoria said evenly, her tone as pleasant as if they were discussing the weather. "Your full name, your position, the coffee shop where Ethan first asked you to lunch 6 weeks ago. The text messages where he told you he was separated and sleeping in the guest room. Isla stumbled back a step. He said, "I know what he said," Victoria interrupted gently. "He's very good at saying things. It's one of his most reliable talents." Ethan's throat tightened. The lobby suddenly felt smaller, brighter, suffocating. Other guests were beginning to glance over. The concierge had stopped mid-conversation. Even the pianist at the grand piano seemed to be playing more quietly. "Victoria, listen," Ethan started. "No." Her voice didn't rise, but it cut through him like winter steel. "You listen. You told me you were in Geneva for a finance summit. Imagine my surprise when my security team flagged a reservation made under our joint credit line for 2 at my hotel." The words landed like stones, one by one. "Your hotel?" Ethan's voice came out strangled. The front desk manager straightened behind them, her professional mask slipping just enough to reveal a hint of satisfaction. "Yes, Mr. Cole. Mrs. Victoria Cole is the majority owner of the Regal Sterling Group. She finalized the acquisition on Monday." The lobby went silent. Even the faint hum of conversation from the lounge died away. Victoria stepped closer, her heels clicking against marble like a countdown. "Surprised? You shouldn't be. I told you last year I was making significant investments. You just never asked where. You were too busy planning your next disappearing act." Ethan swallowed hard. For the first time in years, maybe ever, he had no response, no charm, no angle. He was caught. Completely. Publicly. Irrevocably. And the woman standing in front of him, the woman he'd been systematically underestimating for over a decade, wasn't the trusting wife he'd left at home. She was something else entirely. Someone he'd never really known at all. "Victoria, please." Ethan reached for her arm, desperation bleeding into his voice. "Can we talk about this privately?" She didn't move, didn't flinch. "Oh no, Ethan, you've had enough privacy for one evening. I think public transparency suits you better, don't you?" Her voice carried, not loud, but clear, authoritative. Guests in the lobby turned, no longer pretending they weren't watching. The concierge whispered something to a bellhop. A couple near the bar paused mid-drink. Victoria continued, her tone perfectly measured. "You told me you were attending a 3-day summit on international markets. You even sent me a screenshot of your hotel in Geneva, very thorough. Except my security director noticed something interesting when he ran the credit report this morning." "You're tracking my spending now?" Ethan hissed, anger flashing through his panic. "I'm tracking my money," Victoria corrected coolly. "The same money you've been using to fund weekend escapes with women who think you're clever enough to hide from me. The Riverside Inn last month, the Continental in August, and now here, my hotel." Isla made a small, choked sound. She looked like she wanted the marble floor to open up and swallow her whole. "I didn't know," she whispered, backing toward the elevators. "He told me he was separated. He said the divorce was almost final." Victoria's expression softened, just slightly. "I'm sure he did. That's his favorite story. Don't worry, dear, you're not my problem." She turned back to Ethan, her voice hardening again. "He is." She gestured to Isla without breaking eye contact with her husband. "You're welcome to stay, Miss Monroe. Enjoy the penthouse suite. Order anything you like from room service. Consider it compensation for your time with a man who has no respect for anyone, including himself." "You can't just—" Ethan started. "Can't I?" Victoria's smile was razor thin. "As majority shareholder and owner of this property, I can do whatever I please, including canceling your access to the suite, which I've already done. The charges have been reversed, and your key card has been deactivated." Ethan stared at her, fury and humiliation warring in his chest. "You planned this. You knew I'd be here." "I prepared," Victoria said simply. "There's a difference. You taught me a valuable lesson over the years, Ethan. Expect betrayal, document everything, and never underestimate the person you've underestimated." A woman in a dark business suit emerged from a hallway behind the reception desk. She was older, silver-haired, with the sharp eyes of someone who'd seen every game played twice. She crossed her arms and watched Ethan with the cool detachment of a surgeon. "That's Margaret Chen," Victoria said, following Ethan's gaze. "My attorney. She's been very helpful over the past 6 months." 6 months? The words came out hollow. 6 months of documentation, financial records, hotel receipts, text messages recovered from cloud backups you forgot to delete, photographs from 3 different private investigators. Victoria's voice never wavered. "Did you know that most affairs leave digital footprints?" "You weren't nearly as careful as you thought." Isla grabbed the key card from the reception desk, the one that had been meant for Ethan and her together, and fled toward the elevator without another word. The doors closed on her tear-streaked face. Ethan stood alone in the center of the lobby, surrounded by strangers who now knew exactly what kind of man he was. Victoria stepped closer, lowering her voice to something deadly quiet. "You thought you were untouchable, didn't you? The business trips, the late nights, the excuses. You built an entire architecture of lies in hotels just like this one. But while you were building lies, I was building something real. An empire, a future, something you can never touch." "You're humiliating me," Ethan said through clenched teeth. "No," Victoria replied. "You humiliated yourself." "I'm just making sure everyone sees what I've known for months. Public actions deserve public consequences." She nodded to the front desk manager. "Please have security escort Mr. Cole from the property. He's no longer a welcome guest." "Victoria, it's Ms. Cole," she corrected. "Or better yet, Ms. Whitmore. I'm reclaiming my maiden name. The woman you married, the one who trusted you, who believed in you, who gave up her own career to support yours, she's gone. You destroyed her. What's left is someone you never bothered to know." A security guard appeared at Ethan's elbow, polite but firm. "Sir, if you'll come with me." Ethan looked around wildly, at the guests watching, at the staff pretending not to stare, at his wife, no, his ex-wife, because that's what she clearly was now, standing in the center of her hotel like a queen in her castle. "You'll regret this," he said, his voice shaking. "The only thing I regret," Victoria said quietly, "is not doing this sooner." As the glass doors of the Regal Sterling closed behind Ethan Cole, the cool night air hit him like a slap. His phone buzzed once, twice, 3 times. "Bank alert. Account access restricted. Contact your financial institution. Email from Sterling Legal. Notice of divorce proceedings. Immediate response required. Text from Victoria. The credit card you used for tonight has been canceled. You'll need to find your own way home." He stood there, staring up at the golden windows of the penthouse suite, the room that should have been his escape. Now it was a monument to everything he'd lost in the span of 30 minutes. Inside, Victoria walked through her lobby with the steady grace of someone who'd just won a war she'd been fighting in silence. Margaret Chen fell into step beside her. "That went well," the attorney said dryly. Victoria allowed herself a small smile. "Better than expected, actually. I thought he'd put up more of a fight. Most men do when they realize they've been outmaneuvered." Margaret glanced back toward the doors. "What happens now?" "Now?" Victoria paused at the entrance to her private office, the one with her name on the door in elegant gold lettering. "Now we prepare for what comes next, the legal filings, the asset division, the rebuilding." "And him?" Victoria looked back one last time at the lobby she now owned, the marble, the gold, the crystal chandeliers that had witnessed her victory. "Him? He's not my concern anymore. He stopped being my concern the moment I realized I was stronger without him than I ever was with him." She pushed open her office door, the city lights glittering beyond the windows like promises of everything she was about to become. "Let me tell you how we got here," Victoria said, settling behind her desk. "Let me tell you about the woman I used to be, and the woman I had to become to get to this moment. Hello, my friends. Before we continue, if you have not subscribed, please support the channel subscribing now, like the video, and comment where you are watching from and what time it's at you end." 12 years earlier, Victoria Whitmore had been 23 when she'd first met Ethan Cole at a hotel management conference in Boston. She'd been presenting her senior thesis on sustainable luxury hospitality, passionate, bright-eyed, convinced she was going to revolutionize the industry. Ethan had been in the audience, 27 and already making waves in corporate finance. After her presentation, he'd approached with that devastating smile and said, You're going to change the world. I'd like to watch it happen. They were married 18 months later. By their second anniversary, Victoria had set aside her dreams of hotel ownership to follow Ethan's career from city to city, Boston to Atlanta, Atlanta to Chicago, Chicago to their current home in Philadelphia. Each move came with promises. Just one more promotion, then we'll settle down. Then you can start your business. Then it'll be your turn. Her turn never came. Instead, she became the woman who hosted dinner parties for Ethan's colleagues, who picked up dry cleaning and remembered birthdays and made excuses when he missed anniversaries, who believed him when he said the late nights were about closing deals, not opening hotel room doors. The first time she suspected something was wrong was 3 years ago. A credit card charge from a boutique hotel in Manhattan on a weekend Ethan claimed to be at a local client meeting. When she'd asked about it, he'd laughed it off. Took the client there for lunch. You know how these finance guys are. They want to feel special. She'd believed him. Why wouldn't she? The second time was harder to dismiss. A woman's earring in his car, not hers. When confronted, Ethan had grown defensive, then apologetic. It was from the office holiday party. Someone must have dropped it. Honey, you can't seriously think. She'd wanted to believe him. So she had, but doubt once planted grows roots. Victoria started noticing patterns, the way Ethan angled his phone away when texting, how he'd started going to the gym at odd hours, the new cologne, the suddenly stylish haircuts, the distance that had crept between them like frost across glass. Then came the night that changed everything. She'd woken at 2 a.m. to find Ethan's side of the bed empty. She'd padded downstairs and found him on the patio, phone pressed to his ear, voice low and intimate in a way he hadn't spoken to her in years. "I miss you too," he'd whispered. "Just a few more days, I promise." Victoria had stood in the darkness of the kitchen, listening to her husband make promises to someone else, and felt something inside her crystallize. Not break, crystallize. Transform from something soft into something unbreakably hard. She didn't confront him that night, or the next morning, or the week after. Instead, she made a list. Things I know. My husband is having an affair. This probably isn't his first. If I confront him without proof, he'll deny everything. If I file for divorce without preparation, I'll lose everything I've already sacrificed. Things I need: documentation, legal counsel, financial independence, a plan. The next morning, she'd opened her laptop and begun researching divorce attorneys. By the end of the week, she'd scheduled a consultation with Margaret Chen, a bulldog of a lawyer known for representing women in high-asset divorces. "How long have you known?" Margaret had asked during their first meeting. "Known for certain?" "About 3 months." "Suspected?" "Years." "And you want to file now?" Victoria had shaken her head. "I want to prepare. I want documentation. I want to make sure that when I'm ready to leave, I'm leaving on my terms, not his." Margaret had smiled. "Smart. Most women come to me in crisis. You're coming to me with strategy. I can work with that." What followed were 6 months of careful choreography. Victoria hired a private investigator named James Torres, a former detective with a talent for discretion and a camera with a telephoto lens that could catch a lie from 3 blocks away. The evidence accumulated like snow: hotel receipts, text messages recovered from cloud backups Ethan had forgotten to secure, photographs of Ethan with 4 different women over 6 months, credit card statements showing patterns, always boutique hotels, always weekends, always charged to their joint account. But documentation wasn't enough. Victoria needed independence. That's when she'd remembered her inheritance. Her parents had passed away when she was 30, leaving her a substantial trust fund, nearly $2 million that she'd left untouched, invested conservatively, growing quietly while she'd played the role of supportive wife. Ethan had tried repeatedly to convince her to invest that money in his business ventures. "We could double it in 3 years," he'd said. "Triple it in 5, trust me." She'd always refused, claiming she wanted to keep it as a safety net. He'd called her overly cautious, risk-averse. She'd called it survival instinct. Now, sitting in Margaret's office with financial statements spread across the desk, Victoria made a decision that would change everything. "I want to buy a hotel," she'd said. Margaret had looked up sharply. "A hotel?" "It's what I trained for. What I wanted to do before I gave it all up to follow him around the country. The Regal Sterling is going up for sale. The owner's retiring. It's been underperforming, but the location is prime and the bones are solid. I know I can turn it around. That's a bold move. So is spending 6 months documenting your husband's betrayal and freezing his accounts. Victoria had smiled, the first genuine smile she'd felt in months. I'm done being cautious. I'm done being the woman he thinks I am. If I'm going to rebuild my life, I'm going to do it properly. 3 weeks later, Victoria Whitmore, soon to be Victoria Cole no longer, signed the papers that made her the majority owner of the Regal Sterling Hotel Group. She'd told Ethan she was investing in some mutual funds. He'd barely looked up from his phone. 1 week after that, her security director had flagged a reservation in the hotel system, Mr. and Mrs. Cole, penthouse suite, 2 nights. Victoria had stared at the reservation for a full minute, her heart rate steady, her mind clear. And then she'd called Margaret. "It's time," she'd said. "Get everything ready. Tomorrow night, this ends." Now, standing in her office with the city lights painting her future across the windows, Victoria looked at Margaret and smiled. "That's how we got here," she said quietly. 12 years of being who he wanted me to be, 6 months of becoming who I was always meant to be, and 30 minutes of showing him exactly what happens when you underestimate the wrong woman." Margaret raised her coffee cup in a silent toast. "To strategic victories." "To never being underestimated again," Victoria corrected. Outside, somewhere in the cold Philadelphia night, Ethan Cole was realizing that the woman he'd married, the woman he'd lied to, betrayed, and dismissed, had just outplayed him at every level. And the game had only just begun. Victoria's office occupied the top floor of the Regal Sterling, a corner suite with floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the Philadelphia skyline like a piece of living art. The room was all clean lines and glass, modern, uncluttered, powerful. A mahogany desk commanded the center, flanked by leather chairs that cost more than most people's monthly rent. This wasn't the office of someone playing at business. This was the office of someone who'd already won. Ethan stood just inside the doorway, still reeling from the lobby humiliation, his eyes adjusting to the soft ambient lighting. Margaret Chen had taken a seat in the corner, her leather portfolio open on her lap, pen poised like a weapon. "Sit down, Ethan," Victoria said, her voice calm as she moved behind her desk. Not a request, a command. He remained standing. "I'm not here to be lectured like a child." "Then don't act like one." She gestured to the chair across from her. "Sit. Or leave. Your choice. But if you leave now, everything that happens next will happen without your input. And trust me, you'll want input." Ethan's jaw tightened, but he sat. Pride had already cost him enough tonight. Victoria opened a drawer and withdrew a thick manila folder. She placed it on the desk between them, with the deliberate care of someone laying down a royal flush. "Do you know what this is?" she asked. "More theatrics?" "Documentation." She opened the folder, revealing the first photograph, Ethan and a blonde woman entering the Riverside Inn, his hand on the small of her back, her face turned up to his with unmistakable intimacy. "This is from September 9th. Rachel Davidson from your accounting department." Ethan's face went pale. "Where did you—" Victoria turned the page. Another photo, Ethan and a different woman at an outdoor cafe, leaning close, hands intertwined. "August 14th, Simone Laurent. You met her at the Investors Gala, told me she was a potential client. Turns out she was very potential." "You've been spying on me?" His voice rose, defensive anger flooding back. "You hired someone to follow me?" "Spying implies ignorance," Victoria said evenly, turning another page. "I was collecting proof. There's a difference. One suggests desperation, the other suggests strategy." Margaret spoke from her corner, her tone clinical. "Mr. Cole, everything in this folder is admissible in divorce proceedings. We have photographs from 3 different investigators, credit card statements spanning 14 months, and text message records recovered from cloud backups." Ethan's eyes darted to the attorney, then back to Victoria. "You've been planning this for over a year?" 11 months, to be precise. Victoria pulled out a credit card statement, dates highlighted in yellow. "I started documenting in December when the charges became too obvious to ignore. The Riverside Inn, the Continental, the Madison, 4 different women over 11 months, though I suspect there were more before I started paying attention." She slid the statement across the desk. Ethan stared at it, seeing his own betrayals itemized in black and white. Dinner for two, premium suites, weekend getaways, all charged to their joint account, all impossible to deny. "I trusted you," he said, the words sounding hollow even to himself. Victoria's laugh was soft and bitter. "You trusted that I was too naive to notice, too devoted to question, too dependent to leave. You didn't trust me, Ethan. You underestimated me. Those are very different things." She stood, moving to the window, the city lights casting her silhouette in sharp relief. "I gave you 12 years. I followed you from city to city, gave up my career, played the perfect wife, and you repaid me by making me a fool." "Victoria, I'm not finished." She turned, and the control in her voice was absolute. "You want to know when I stopped loving you? It wasn't when I found the first hotel receipt. It wasn't when I saw the text messages. It was when I realized that you were never going to stop, that this was who you are. A man who takes and takes and never considers what he's destroying." Ethan pushed back from the desk, pacing. "So what is this? Revenge? You bought a hotel just to humiliate me?" "I bought a hotel because it's what I always wanted to do. You being careless enough to book a room here was just fortunate timing." Victoria returned to her desk, sitting with the practiced ease of someone who'd already won. "This isn't revenge, Ethan. Revenge is emotional. This is strategy." Margaret cleared her throat. "Mr. Cole, I should inform you that as of 8 o'clock this morning, all joint accounts have been frozen pending divorce proceedings. Mrs. Cole filed preliminary papers yesterday afternoon." The words hit him like a physical blow. "What?" "Your accounts are frozen," Victoria repeated, each word landing with finality. "I've already filed the preliminary divorce papers. The house is in my name. My parents insisted when we bought it. The investment portfolio was funded by my inheritance. The cars are registered to me. And now I own 3 properties worth a combined $12 million. Ethan's face went from pale to gray. "You can't just—" "I can. And I did." Victoria opened another section of the folder, revealing financial statements marked with legal annotations. "Margaret's team has spent 6 months preparing this case. We have documentation of marital funds used for extramarital affairs, a violation of fiduciary duty in this state. We have proof of deception. And we have a prenuptial agreement that you signed 13 years ago that heavily favors the non-adulterous party." "I don't remember signing a prenup." "You were drunk at the bachelor party the night before the wedding. My father insisted. You signed it without reading." Victoria's smile was cold. "Another example of your excellent decision-making." Ethan sank back into the chair, the fight draining out of him. "How long have you been planning this?" "Long enough to make sure I'd win." Victoria closed the folder with a soft snap. "You'll be served formal papers tomorrow morning. I suggest you hire an attorney. Though I should warn you, Margaret's reputation tends to make lawyers cautious about taking opposing cases." Margaret stood, smoothing her suit. "I'll prepare the morning filing. Mrs. Cole, is there anything else you need this evening?" "No, thank you, Margaret." Victoria waited until the attorney left before turning back to Ethan. "You can go now. There's nothing left to discuss." Ethan stood slowly, a broken man in an expensive suit. At the door, he paused. "I never meant to hurt you." "No," Victoria said softly. "You just never meant to get caught. There's a difference." As the door closed behind him, Victoria sat alone in her glass office, surrounded by evidence of betrayal and the empire she'd built from its ashes. She didn't feel victorious. She felt free. The penthouse suite was obscene in its luxury. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a marble bathroom larger than Isla's entire apartment, a king-sized bed draped in Egyptian cotton that probably cost more than her monthly salary, champagne on ice, chocolate-covered strawberries arranged on a silver platter, rose petals scattered across silk pillows. It was supposed to be romantic. Instead, it felt like a crime scene. Isla Monroe sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing her cream dress, mascara streaking down her cheeks. The keycard lay on the nightstand beside her phone. 17 missed calls from her best friend, 3 from her mother, 1 from a number she didn't recognize. She couldn't bring herself to answer any of them. How could I have been so stupid? The question repeated in her mind like a mantra of shame. She replayed every moment, Ethan approaching her desk 6 weeks ago with that devastating smile, the lunch invitation, the way he'd leaned close and said, "I haven't felt this alive in years." "My marriage is over," he'd told her over coffee. "We're separated. Living in different parts of the house. The lawyers are already involved. I just need to wait for the paperwork to finalize." She'd believed him. Why wouldn't she? He seemed so genuine, so vulnerable. He'd shown her photos of a house, talked about how empty it felt, how he'd been sleeping in the guest room for months. All lies. The wife, Victoria, elegant and powerful in her white suit, wasn't living in another wing of some mansion. She was running an empire, and Isla had been nothing more than a line item on a credit card statement, evidence in a folder, another chapter in a pattern she'd been too naive to recognize. A soft knock at the door made her jump. "Miss Monroe?" A woman's voice, calm and professional. "May I come in?" Isla's breath caught. She knew that voice. She opened the door to find Victoria standing in the hallway. No longer flanked by attorneys or security. Just a woman in a white suit, holding 2 glasses and a bottle of wine that looked older than Isla's car. "I'm not here to make this worse," Victoria said quietly. "May I?" Isla stepped back, numb. Victoria entered with the easy grace of someone who owned not just the hotel, but perhaps the entire city. She set the glasses on the table, poured with steady hands. "I'm so sorry," Isla blurted out, the words tumbling over themselves. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know he was still married. He told me you were separated, that it was over, that he was just waiting for the paperwork to finalize." Victoria's smile was sad, knowing. That's his favorite line. He used it on Rachel. And Simone, probably on the others too. Isla felt her stomach twist. "There were others?" "At least 4 that I know of, probably more." Victoria handed her a glass. "You're not the villain in this story, Isla. You're a victim, just like I was. But I should have known. I should have asked more questions, looked for signs." "He's very good at lying," Victoria interrupted gently. "Trust me, I lived with him for 12 years and didn't see it until I forced myself to look. You knew him for 6 weeks. You didn't stand a chance." Isla took the wine with shaking hands, drinking deeply. The silence stretched between them, not quite comfortable but not hostile either. "Why are you being nice to me?" Isla finally asked. "I slept with your husband." "You slept with a man who told you he was available," Victoria corrected. "There's a difference. He betrayed both of us, Isla. The difference is, I had 12 years to build up defenses. You had 6 weeks to fall for a lie." Isla wiped at her eyes, smearing what was left of her makeup. "Everyone in that lobby saw. Everyone knows I'm the other woman." "Everyone in that lobby saw a woman who was deceived," Victoria said firmly. "And by tomorrow they'll know the full story, that Ethan Cole is a serial cheater who brought his mistress to a hotel owned by his wife. You'll be a footnote. He'll be the punchline." "I should leave. I should just go home and pretend this never happened." "Or," Victoria said, standing and moving toward the door, "you could stay. Enjoy the suite. Order the most expensive room service. Use the spa. Take what you can from this disaster because, trust me, he won't compensate you for the time you wasted on him." "I can't consider it compensation," Victoria said. "He lied to both of us. The difference is, I'm taking the house, the accounts, and the business. You're taking the penthouse suite and a very expensive bottle of wine. It's not equal, but it's something." Isla stared at her, this woman who should hate her, but instead was offering grace she didn't deserve. "Why are you doing this?" Victoria paused at the door, her hand on the frame. "Because 5 years ago, I might have been you. Young, trusting, believing that a charming man with a sad story was worth the risk. I want you to walk away from this knowing that you weren't stupid, you were human, and he was a predator." "What happens now?" "Now?" Victoria's smile was small, but genuine. "You decide whether you want to be defined by this moment or learn from it. I chose to learn. I hope you do too." The door closed softly, leaving Isla alone with her thoughts, expensive wine, and the realization that she'd been one player in a much larger game. She looked around the suite, the champagne, the rose petals, the carefully orchestrated seduction scene, and felt anger replace shame. Not at Victoria, at Ethan, at herself for believing him, at the casual cruelty of being used. As Isla finally picked up her phone to call her best friend somewhere below in the lobby, Victoria walked past the reception desk with the calm, measured stride of a woman who'd just won another small battle in a war she'd been fighting alone. The front desk manager looked up. "Everything all right, Ms. Cole?" Victoria glanced toward the elevators, thinking of the young woman upstairs who would either crumble or rise from this moment. "Everything," Victoria said quietly, "is exactly as it should be." She continued toward her office, her mind already on tomorrow's tasks, the divorce filing, the press statement, the next property acquisition. The game wasn't over. It was just beginning. The November air bit through Ethan's suit jacket as he stood on the sidewalk outside the Regal Sterling, watching well-dressed couples drift past him into the warm glow of the lobby. His lobby. Except it wasn't. It had never been his. It was hers. His phone buzzed again. He'd been ignoring it for the past 20 minutes, but the notifications kept coming, relentless as his unraveling life. Transaction declined. American Express ending in 4729, account access suspended. Chase Premier, checking withdrawal denied, Merrill Lynch investment account. Ethan stared at the screen, his reflection ghostly in the black glass. He tried his primary credit card at a nearby ATM. Declined. He tried calling his bank. "I'm sorry, Mr. Cole, but we've received legal notification to freeze all accounts pending divorce proceedings. You'll need to contact your attorney." Attorney. He didn't even have one yet. He called Victoria, straight to voicemail, called again, same thing. On the third attempt, he got a text. "Contact me through legal counsel only. Margaret Chen, 215-555-0147. Damn it! He slammed his hand against the ATM, earning stares from passers-by. A taxi pulled up, and Ethan climbed in, giving his home address. Except, was it still his home? Victoria had said she'd changed the locks, that his things were in storage. "Actually," Ethan said, his voice hollow, "take me to the Marriott on Broad Street." "That'll be about $18, the driver said. Ethan handed over a credit card. The driver ran it, handed it back. Declined. "You got cash?" He checked his wallet. $43. Enough for a taxi and maybe a coffee. Not enough for a hotel room. "Just drop me at Rittenhouse Square," Ethan said quietly. He ended up on a bench in the empty park, the November cold seeping through his clothes, scrolling through his phone for answers that didn't exist. His mind kept circling back, picking at memories like old wounds. 3 years ago, Rachel from accounting, wide-eyed and eager. "Are you sure your wife won't find out?" she'd asked. "Victoria?" Ethan had laughed. "She doesn't even check the credit card statements. She's too busy with book club and yoga classes." Except Victoria hadn't been busy with book club. She'd been documenting, planning, building. 2 years ago, Simone from the Investors Gala, sophisticated and French accented, they'd spent a weekend at the Continental. He'd told Victoria he was at a financial summit in New York. She'd made him soup when he got home, said he looked tired. He'd thought she was sweet, naive, the perfect wife who asked no questions. She'd been asking questions, just not to him, to private investigators, to attorneys, to forensic accountants, 6 months ago. The Riverside Inn with a woman whose name he could barely remember now. He'd come home, smelling of her perfume. Victoria had hugged him at the door, smiled, asked about his trip. He'd felt so clever, so untouchable. She'd been smelling the evidence, cataloging it, adding it to the folder that would destroy him. How had he been so blind? The answer came with brutal clarity, because he'd wanted to be. Because it was easier to believe Victoria was simple, trusting, content to be Mrs. Ethan Cole than to see her as a separate person with her own intelligence, her own agency, her own plans. He'd built his entire deception on the foundation of underestimating her, and she'd let him. His phone rang, a number he didn't recognize. He answered with desperate hope. "Victoria?" "Mr. Cole, this is Richard Thornton. I'm an attorney with Thornton & Associates. Your colleague David Matthews referred me. He mentioned you might need representation." Ethan exhaled. "Yes, God, yes, my wife. She's filed for divorce." "She's frozen all our accounts. I need someone who can—" "I'm aware of the situation," Thornton interrupted, his tone professional but cautious. "I've already received a courtesy call from Margaret Chen's office. Mr. Cole, I need to be frank with you. I've reviewed the preliminary documentation they've sent over, and this is not a favorable case." "What does that mean?" "It means your wife has been preparing for this divorce for nearly a year. She has documentation of multiple extramarital affairs. She has financial records showing marital funds used for those affairs. She has a prenuptial agreement signed by you that heavily penalizes adultery. And, this is the critical part, she owns virtually all of your marital assets." "That's not possible. The house, the investments, are all in her name," Thornton said. "The house was purchased with funds from her parents, deed in her name only. The investment portfolio was funded by her inheritance. The hotel she just acquired was purchased with her private capital." "Mr. Cole, what exactly do you own?" Ethan's mind went blank. His retirement account? His car? No, wait, that was registered to Victoria for insurance purposes. His business suits, his watch collection, some furniture that was probably hers anyway. I don't know." "That's what I thought." Thornton's sigh was audible. "Mr. Cole, Margaret Chen is one of the most formidable divorce attorneys in the state. She doesn't take cases she can't win, and she's clearly spent months building an airtight case against you. My professional advice? Accept whatever settlement she offers. Fighting this will be expensive, public, and you'll almost certainly lose." "There has to be something." "There isn't." Thornton's voice softened slightly. "I'm sorry, but Victoria Cole, or Victoria Whitmore, as she'll be going by, has outmaneuvered you at every turn. You're not just outmatched, you're already defeated. The best you can do now is minimize the damage." The call ended. Ethan sat on the bench, surrounded by the sound of distant traffic and falling leaves, holding a phone that connected him to accounts he couldn't access, to a house he couldn't enter, to a life that had evaporated in the span of 2 hours. His phone buzzed one more time, an email from Sterling Legal. Subject: Formal Notice of Divorce Proceedings. "Mr. Cole, please be advised that divorce proceedings have been filed on behalf of Victoria Whitmore, formerly Cole, in Philadelphia County Court. You will be formally served tomorrow morning at 9:00 a.m. A detailed asset division proposal is attached. We recommend you secure legal representation immediately. Margaret Chen, escrimal attached, was a 53-page document that outlined in excruciating legal detail exactly how thoroughly Victoria had dismantled his life." Ethan closed his eyes against the cold November wind and realized, perhaps for the first time in his adult life, that he'd lost something he could never get back. Not his money, not his house, not even his marriage, his certainty, his sense of control, the comfortable delusion that he was smarter than everyone around him. Victoria had taken all of it, and she'd done it so quietly, so methodically, that he'd never seen it coming. Victoria's office glowed with soft light from the desk lamp, casting long shadows across the financial documents spread before her like battle plans. Outside, the city pulsed with Saturday night energy, restaurants filling, theaters opening, couples walking hand in hand through streets Victoria now commanded from her glass tower. Margaret Chen sat across from her, reading glasses perched on her nose, reviewing the asset division proposal line by line. "The retirement account is the only thing he can legitimately claim," she said. "Everything else is ironclad." "Let him have it," Victoria said, signing another document with steady strokes. "I'm not interested in bleeding him dry. I'm interested in being free." Margaret looked up, studying her client with the sharp assessment of someone who'd seen hundreds of divorces. "Most women in your position would want blood." "Blood is messy." Victoria set down her pen, leaning back in her chair. "Revenge is messy. It requires emotional energy I don't want to spend on him anymore. This isn't revenge, Margaret. This is strategy. Clean, efficient, final. Strategic victory is still victory. The sweetest kind." Victoria allowed herself a small smile. "He thought I was weak because I was kind, naive because I was trusting. He mistook patience for ignorance. That was his mistake, not mine." Margaret pulled out another folder, this one containing the press release Victoria had drafted earlier. "Are you sure you want to release this statement? Once it's out, the whole city will know what happened." Victoria read through the carefully worded announcement. "Victoria Whitmore, founder and CEO of Whitmore Hospitality Group, announces the acquisition of the Regal Sterling Hotel as the cornerstone property of her expanding luxury hotel portfolio. Ms. Whitmore, a graduate of Cornell's School of Hotel Administration, brings 15 years of hospitality expertise and a vision for reimagining urban luxury. The Sterling represents the first of several planned acquisitions across the Northeast Corridor. Ms. Whitmore was previously known as Victoria Cole, but has reclaimed her maiden name as part of a new chapter in both her personal and professional life. "It's perfect," Victoria said. "Professional, forward-looking. The divorce will be public record anyway. This controls the narrative. You're not worried about the attention? I'm counting on it." Victoria's eyes glinted with something harder than satisfaction: determination. "Women need to see that you can rebuild from betrayal, that being underestimated isn't the end of your story, it's the beginning. If my visibility helps one woman realize she has options, then the embarrassment is worth it." Margaret smiled, genuine warmth breaking through her professional reserve. "You know, in 20 years of practice, I've never had a client turn their divorce into a business launch. Why waste a good crisis?" Victoria signed her approval on the press release. "Send it out Monday morning. By the time Ethan is served the final papers, the city will already know me as Victoria Whitmore, CEO, not Victoria Cole, betrayed wife." They worked in companionable silence for another hour, reviewing documents, finalizing strategies, preparing for the legal battle that would be over almost before it began. Finally, Margaret closed her laptop and studied Victoria with an expression that was almost maternal. "Can I ask you something personal?" Victoria looked up. "Of course." "You really loved him, didn't you, in the beginning?" The question hung in the air between them. Victoria turned to the window, watching the city lights blur and refocus like memories. "I loved the idea of him," she said quietly. "The ambitious young finance executive, the charming man who made me feel special. The husband I thought we'd become together." She paused, her reflection ghostly in the glass. "But the man I loved? He never existed. Or maybe he did for a few months before the lies started. I don't know anymore." "That's the hardest part," Margaret said. "Realizing you were in love with a fiction." "No." Victoria turned back, her voice steady. "The hardest part was realizing I'd become a fiction too, the perfect wife, the trusting partner. The woman who pretended not to notice. I played that role so well, I almost forgot who I was underneath." Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. She almost ignored it, then saw the preview. "Please, Victoria, can we talk? Just the two of us. I'll explain everything." Margaret saw her expression shift. "Him?" "Yes." Victoria typed a brief response. "Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m., hotel lobby. 5 minutes, that's all you get." "You're meeting with him?" "One last time." Victoria set her phone down. "He needs closure. Or maybe I do. Either way, tomorrow I want to look him in the eye and know that I made the right choice. That walking away from 12 years wasn't cowardice, it was courage. And if he begs, promises to change?" Victoria's laugh was soft but certain. "Then I'll remember the folder of evidence, the 4 different women, the 11 months of lies, and I'll walk away knowing that some people don't change, they just get better at hiding." Margaret stood, gathering her materials. "I'll see you Tuesday for the formal filing. Try to get some rest, Victoria. You've earned it." After Margaret left, Victoria remained at her desk, looking at the documents that represented her liberation: the hotel acquisition papers, the divorce petition, the press release that would introduce the world to Victoria Whitmore. She thought about Ethan, probably in some cheap hotel room or on a friend's couch, realizing the full extent of what he'd lost. She felt no satisfaction in his suffering, only relief that his suffering was no longer her responsibility. Her phone sat silent on the desk. No more desperate texts, no more calls, just the confirmation: 8 a.m., I'll be there. Victoria touched the glass of the window, feeling the cold night beyond it. Somewhere out there, Ethan was learning what it meant to lose everything. Tomorrow, she'd face him one last time, not as his wife, not as his victim, but as the woman she'd rebuilt from the wreckage of his betrayal. She whispered to the empty office, to the city beyond, to the future she was building brick by brick: "Tomorrow ends the story of us." Then she turned off the light and walked toward whatever came next. Sunday morning arrived with the kind of crystalline clarity that made everything look sharp-edged and unforgiving. The hotel lounge was quiet at 8 a.m., just the soft clink of coffee cups and the rustle of newspapers. Sunlight poured through the tall glass windows, illuminating dust motes that drifted like tiny witnesses to what was about to unfold. Victoria sat in a leather armchair near the windows, dressed in a navy blazer and cream silk blouse. Professional, untouchable. A folder rested on her lap. Her coffee sat untouched on the table beside her. Ethan appeared at exactly 8 o'clock, looking like a man who'd aged 5 years in 2 days. His suit was rumpled, the same one from Friday night. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. His confident stride was gone, replaced by the tentative steps of someone walking on broken ground. "Thank you for meeting me," he said, his voice hoarse. Victoria gestured to the chair across from her. 5 minutes. That's what I promised. He sat, leaning forward with the desperate energy of someone about to make a closing argument in a trial he'd already lost. "Victoria, I know I've made terrible mistakes, unforgivable mistakes. But we've been together 12 years. That has to count for something." "It does," she said calmly. "It counts as 12 years I'll never get back. Please, just listen." He reached for her hand across the table. She pulled back. He withdrew, wounded. "I can change. I know I can. I'll go to therapy, cut off all contact with anyone else. Whatever you need, we can start over." Victoria studied him with the clinical detachment of a scientist examining a failed experiment. "Change is for people who haven't already been exposed, Ethan. You didn't want to change when you had the chance. You wanted to keep getting away with it. I was an idiot. I know that now. I threw away the best thing in my life for—" He gestured helplessly. "For nothing. For stupid, meaningless. For 4 different women over 11 months, Victoria corrected. For years of lying before that. For hotel rooms and secret phone calls and a double life you maintained so effortlessly you convinced yourself I was too stupid to notice. I never thought you were stupid." "Yes, you did." Her voice remained level, surgical in its precision. "You thought I was simple, sweet, conveniently blind. You built your entire deception on the assumption that I would never question you, never investigate, never fight back." Ethan's hands trembled as he gripped the arms of his chair. "What can I do? There has to be something." Victoria opened the folder on her lap and withdrew a document bound with blue backing. She placed it on the table between them with the finality of a judge's gavel. "You can sign these." He stared at the papers. Divorce papers. Prepared by Margaret Chen, reviewed by 3 other attorneys. Filed with the court Friday evening. She slid a pen across the table. "All they need is your signature." "I can't just—" He looked around wildly, as if the elegant lounge might offer escape. Several staff members were moving through the space, arranging flowers, adjusting artwork, watching. "Not here, not like this." "Where would you prefer? Another hotel? Another public place where you thought you were safe?" Victoria's expression didn't shift. "Sign them, Ethan. Or don't. But know that if you make me go to court, I will present every piece of evidence I have, every photograph, every text message, every hotel receipt, and it will all become public record. You wouldn't? I would. Because I'm done protecting your reputation at the expense of my dignity." Ethan picked up the pen with shaking hands. "This is revenge. You're punishing me." "No." Victoria leaned back in her chair, sunlight haloing her dark hair. "This isn't revenge, Ethan. This is me remembering who I am, who I was before I met you, before I made myself smaller to make you feel bigger, before I convinced myself that being your wife was enough." "I loved you," he said, his voice breaking. "You loved having me." Victoria's tone remained steady, but something flickered in her eyes. Not pain, but the memory of it. "You loved the convenience of a wife who asked no questions, who managed your home and your social calendar and your image. But love? Love requires seeing someone, really seeing them. And you never saw me, Ethan. You saw a reflection of yourself." The pen hovered over the signature line. "What happens after this?" "You move on. You find an apartment you can actually afford with your retirement account and whatever salary you can maintain. You rebuild your life from whatever pieces are left." She paused. And I continue building mine. And us? There is no us. Victoria stood, smooth and final. There hasn't been for a long time. I just finally stopped pretending. Ethan signed. His signature was shaky, barely legible, but legally binding. He pushed the papers back across the table. Victoria picked them up, checked the signature, then tucked them back into her folder. Margaret will file these tomorrow morning. You'll receive final notification within 30 days. She turned to leave. Victoria, wait. His voice cracked with desperation. She paused, but didn't turn around. What? I'm sorry. I'm truly, truly sorry. For a long moment, she stood perfectly still, silhouetted against the morning light. Then, without looking back, I know you are. You're sorry you got caught. You're sorry you lost everything. You're sorry you're sitting in a hotel you can't afford, signing away a marriage you destroyed. But you're not sorry enough to have stopped before it came to this, and that tells me everything I need to know. She walked away, her heels clicking against marble with the rhythm of finality. The front desk manager nodded respectfully as she passed. The concierge held the elevator. The doorman smiled. Everyone in the lobby knew who she was now. The woman who'd caught her husband red-handed. The woman who'd turned betrayal into empire. Ethan remained in his chair, surrounded by the opulence of the regal Sterling, the leather furniture, the fresh flowers, the sunlight streaming through windows that framed a city he no longer recognized as his. He held a pen that had just signed away 12 years. Victoria Whitmore held a folder that contained her freedom. In the mathematics of their ending, she'd calculated perfectly. And he was left with nothing but the sum of his mistakes. 6 months later, the Philadelphia Business Journal arrived at newsstands on a bright May morning with Victoria Whitmore on the cover. She stood in the lobby of the Regal Sterling, arms crossed, chin lifted, wearing a charcoal suit that meant business. The headline read, "From Ashes to Empire, How Victoria Whitmore Built a Luxury Hotel Portfolio in 6 months." The article was everywhere, picked up by national outlets, shared across social media, featured on morning news shows. Victoria's phone hadn't stopped ringing in 3 days. She sat in her expanded office. She'd taken over the entire top floor now, reviewing acquisition proposals for a 4th property in Boston when her assistant knocked. "Ms. Whitmore, your 10 o'clock is here." Isla Munro entered with the hesitant confidence of someone still learning to trust good fortune. She'd changed in 6 months. Haircut shorter, more professional, wardrobe upgraded from junior associate to director level. Eyes that had once held shame now reflected cautious optimism. "Have a seat, Isla." Victoria gestured to the chair across from her. "I've reviewed your marketing proposal for the Boston launch. It's excellent." "Thank you." Isla's smile was genuine. "I still can't believe you hired me. After everything—" "You were deceived, not defeated," Victoria interrupted gently. "There's a difference. You had talent before that night, and you have talent now. What happened with Ethan doesn't define you unless you let it." Isla nodded, blinking back unexpected emotion. "Working here. Working for you, it's given me something I didn't know I needed, a chance to prove I'm more than the worst moment of my life. We're all more than our worst moments." Victoria stood, moving to the window that overlooked the city. "I spent 12 years being defined by someone else's choices, his career, his ambitions, his betrayals. This company—" She gestured to the skyline where 3 more Whitmore hotels now stood. "This is me defining myself." "The press loves the story," Isla said. "Betrayed wife becomes hotel mogul. It's very Cinderella." Victoria laughed. "Except I didn't need a prince. I needed a good attorney, a business plan, and the courage to bet on myself." Her assistant reappeared. "Ms. Whitmore, Forbes is online too. They want to discuss their Women Who Built Empires feature." Victoria took the call, her voice shifting into the smooth professionalism of a CEO comfortable in her power. Isla watched, seeing clearly now what Ethan must have overlooked for years. Victoria Whitmore wasn't someone's wife playing at business. She was a force that had simply been waiting for permission to exist. Across town, in a sports bar near Rittenhouse Square, Ethan Cole sat alone at the corner table, nursing his second beer of the afternoon. The Philadelphia Business Journal lay open in front of him, Victoria's face staring up with the kind of confidence that felt like an indictment. He'd read the article 3 times, each reading more painful than the last. "I spent years supporting someone else's dreams," Whitmore told our reporter. "When that relationship ended, I realized I didn't need to start over. I needed to start, period. Everything I'd learned, everything I'd set aside, it was all still there, waiting for me to claim it." The Whitmore Hospitality Group now operates 4 luxury properties across the Northeast, with plans for 6 more acquisitions by year's end. Industry analysts call Whitmore's rise unprecedented and inspiring. "She didn't just survive her divorce," notes hospitality consultant James Morrison. "She used it as a launching pad. That takes vision most people don't have." Ethan folded the magazine, but Victoria's image remained burned in his mind. He worked consulting gigs now, contract finance work that paid a fraction of what he'd earned before. His apartment was a 1-bedroom in a neighborhood he'd once driven through without stopping. His car was 8 years old. His suits were off the rack. The divorce settlement had been brutal but fair. He kept his retirement account and personal effects. Victoria kept everything else. The prenuptial agreement had been airtight, and his documented infidelity had eliminated any negotiating power. But it wasn't the money that haunted him. Money could be rebuilt. What kept him awake at night was the realization of what he'd actually lost. He'd thought Victoria was the supporting character in his life story, the devoted wife who made him look good at parties, who managed the domestic details, who asked no difficult questions. He'd thought he was the successful one, the powerful one, the one who made things happen. Now he understood. Victoria had always been the powerful one. She'd made him look successful. She'd built the foundation while he'd built lies. She'd been the architect of their life while he'd been a tenant, assuming he owned the place. The bartender passed by. "Another beer?" Ethan looked at the magazine, at Victoria's face radiating the kind of success that came from authenticity rather than image. "No, just the check." He walked out into the May sunshine, the city busy with people who had places to be, things to build, lives to live. Somewhere in this city, Victoria was in meetings, making decisions, expanding an empire. Ela was probably with her, rebuilding from the same wreckage he'd created. And him? He was alone with a magazine article that told the story of a woman who'd been strong enough to leave, smart enough to plan, and visionary enough to build something remarkable from the ruins of his betrayal. He'd destroyed their marriage. But in doing so, he'd freed something in Victoria that had been waiting 12 years to emerge. The irony was almost poetic. His worst behavior had catalyzed her best self. Ethan folded the magazine under his arm and walked toward his mediocre apartment in his mediocre life, finally understanding that he hadn't just lost a wife. He'd lost the only person who'd ever made him worth knowing. The lobby of the Regal Sterling looked different in the golden light of a June evening. Not physically. The marble still gleamed. The chandeliers still cast their 1,000 points of light. The piano still played soft melodies in the corner. But the energy had shifted. Where there had once been quiet elegance, there was now purposeful vitality. Staff moved with the confidence of people who worked for someone who valued them. Guests lingered in conversation, feeling the warmth that came from genuine hospitality rather than manufactured luxury. Victoria Whitmore stood near the reception desk, watching it all unfold like a conductor observing her orchestra. She'd changed into something more comfortable for the evening, a silk blouse and tailored slacks, her hair down for once, diamonds at her ears catching the light. "Ms. Whitmore?" the front desk manager approached, the same woman who'd witnessed that fateful confrontation 6 months ago. "The quarterly reports are ready for your review." "Thank you, Andrea." "I'll look at them tomorrow." Victoria smiled. "Go home. It's past 7. "Are you sure? I can stay." "I'm sure. Enjoy your evening." As Andrea gathered her things, Victoria moved to the spot where she'd stood that night, right here, in the center of the lobby, where 2 worlds had collided, where lies had unraveled and truth had finally, brutally emerged. She could still see it, Ethan's face draining of color, Isla's confusion giving way to horror, the guests pretending not to watch, the moment when 12 years of careful construction had come crashing down. At the time, it had felt like destruction, like the end of everything she'd built. Now, standing in the same spot with 3 more hotels bearing her name, a 4th in development, and a business that employed over 200 people, She understood something she couldn't have known then. That moment wasn't destruction, it was liberation. The silence after the chaos, after Ethan had left, after the staff had returned to their duties, after the witnesses had scattered, that silence had been the sound of chains breaking. The weight of pretending, of smoothing over, of making excuses for someone else's choices had lifted so completely that she'd felt lighter than air. She'd stood right here, in this exact spot, and realized she was free. Free to remember who she was. Free to build what she'd always wanted. Free to stop being defined by someone else's failures and start being defined by her own vision. A young couple entered through the glass doors, the man's hand gentle on the small of his partner's back. They approached the desk with the nervous excitement of people celebrating something special. Victoria watched them, feeling no bitterness, only gratitude that some people got it right. Her phone buzzed. A text from Margaret. Boston property closing confirmed. Congratulations, CEO. Victoria smiled, pocketing her phone. She walked to the wall behind the reception desk where a new bronze plaque had been installed just last week. Whitmore Hospitality Group, founded 2024. Victoria Whitmore, founder and CEO. Strength is not the absence of vulnerability. It's what you build when everything falls apart. She'd chosen those words carefully. They weren't about revenge or vindication. They were about transformation. About the truth that betrayal, while painful, could be the catalyst for becoming who you were always meant to be. Victoria thought about Ethan, wherever he was now. She hoped he was finding his way, learning from his mistakes, becoming someone better than the man who'd walked into this lobby 6 months ago. But more than that, she hoped he understood that she didn't ruin him. He'd ruined himself. She'd simply stopped participating in his destruction and started building something he could never touch, never diminish, never take credit for. The piano player finished one song and began another, something hopeful and forward-looking. Victoria closed her eyes, breathing in the scent of fresh flowers from the arrangements she'd personally chosen that morning, feeling the marble cool beneath her feet, hearing the soft murmur of conversations from people who'd chosen her hotel, because it felt like somewhere worth being. This empire hadn't been built on revenge. It had been built on clarity, on the decision to stop asking, "Why did he betray me?" and start asking, "Who am I without him?" The answer had been waiting all along. Someone remarkable. Victoria opened her eyes and walked toward the elevator, ready to go up to the penthouse suite. Her suite now, where she lived above her creation, surrounded by the life she'd built from the ruins of someone else's lies. As the elevator doors closed, she caught her reflection in the polished brass. She looked like herself. Not someone's wife, not someone's victim. Just Victoria Whitmore, the woman who'd learned that the strongest foundations are built not from perfection, but from the courage to start over when everything falls apart. The doors opened to her private floor. City lights glittered beyond floor-to-ceiling windows, her space, her sanctuary, her empire. She whispered to the empty hallway, to the woman she used to be, to anyone who'd ever felt too broken to rebuild. When someone betrays your trust, don't seek revenge. Build something they can never touch again. And then she stepped into her future, leaving the past exactly where it belonged, behind her. She didn't ruin him, he ruined himself, and from the ruins, she built an empire. When trust is broken, revenge isn't power, clarity is. The moment you stop asking, "Why did they betray me?" and start asking, "Who am I without them?" that's when you become unstoppable. Victoria Whitmore didn't just survive betrayal, she transformed it into the foundation of something extraordinary, because the strongest people aren't those who never fall apart. They're the ones who build empires from the pieces. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to remember their strength. Have you ever been underestimated by someone you loved? Tell us your story in the comments. Remember, you're not defined by who left you. You're defined by what you build after they're gone.